All right, my brother's Jeep's back in. We are having some water pump overheating issues. The water pump's leaking a little bit. We're going to go ahead and put a water pump and a thermostat in it. I'm going to go ahead and put a coolant temp sensor in it as well, and possibly a PCV valve today. But I think we're going to do separate videos on the temp sensor and the PCV. So check back in other videos that are coming up for that. So this one will probably just be the water pump and thermostat, because those are kind of combined together in the same area. The other two are in separate total locations. So we're going to jump into this thing and get started. As you can see, we haven't taken anything apart. This is what it's going to look like when you lift the hood. We've got to get all this stuff out of the way because the water pump is down here. So first thing we're going to do is just pop the cover off. And we're going to work on getting this air intake hose out of the way, which is pretty simple. We got these two bolts here. Got the clamp here under the throttle body, and we can either take this clamp off or we can pop the clips and just take the whole lid off. And that's probably what we're going to do. That way we can just kind of look at the air filter while we're there. All right, take a flathead. Take a nut driver too and pull that off. Sometimes it's easier with a nut driver. And get to it what you can on this one. I'm going to loosen that clamp up really good. We're going to take these 10 millimeters out. Find somewhere that's safe to store your bolts so you don't lose them. I'm just going to pop those clips off. There's a third one over here. Fourth one down in that corner. And we're going to need to take this PVC hose off. Tight. Pop right off. Got an air intake temp sensor. I believe that's what that is right there. Just kind of push the button. There's a button right there. Release that. Pull that bad boy out of there. Okay, that frees up quite a bit of room here, so that's good. Take a peek at the air filter. I think it's pretty dirty. I'll throw that on the floor and I'll clean it a little bit. First thing we're going to want to do, most likely, might have to unhook the battery and get that alternator out of the way. Let me take a quick look real quick and see if we can do it without pulling that thing off of there. Looks like we're going to have to remove that alternator and bracket to get it out of the way to get that water pump out of there, and may have to remove an idler pulley. So we're going to jump in and unhook the battery. You don't want to, you got electricity, you got battery voltage to here, you don't want that arcing on anything. Even though it's got a cover on it, we're going to go ahead and unhook it, and then we're going to remove the bolts out of this bracket, which looks like we got two here, two on this side, two down here. I think that's it. Maybe one hidden somewhere, one or two hidden somewhere. We'll find out if there is, and I'll let you know if there is. So we're going to remove those 6 bolts and unhook the battery first, and then we'll get going. That whole battery post. Oh, he's got a cap on that. I forgot he had a problem with a loose battery. Wow. So this thing has a sleeve on it. So I like to take my negative cable off first. Take the positive one off first. You're going to still be arcing. In this case, I like to go ahead and take both battery cables off. Some people will tell you just to take one off. And this will be tight. Take them both off and get them out of the way. That way we have no chance of arcing anything. All right, I'm gonna take these 15 millimeters out. You can use air, you can use a battery operated ratchet, or you can just use a hand ratchet. That's what I'm doing this morning. I'll take that one out. Take that one out, that one out, that one out. And that one is a different size. Looks like that's maybe a 13 down there. That looks like that's a 13 and a 13 there as well. I guess I wasn't thinking about the belt because these alternators are turned around backwards. We need to take the tension off this belt tensioner, which is right here. It requires a 1/2 inch drive ratchet. So you can just take the end of the ratchet and stick it right in there. And it is a shock absorber style, so you got to kind of slowly apply pressure to it. And then I'm going to walk the belt off. All right, we'll get an extension. 3-inch extension on that 1/2 inch drive ratchet. I'm able to get out past this heater hose, this one, excuse me, and try to push the pressure on it now. And I just walked it off at the top once I'm able to collapse that down just a little bit. And you can see how much it comes back up. Okay. All right, you gotta put a good bit of pressure on that thing. So you want some good leverage on it. And it takes just a second before it starts collapsing down. So just be patient with it, put some pressure on it, hold it. And then I just, with my other hand, I just looped it off the top, just slid it off the top right there. See, there's my belt right there. All right, now I can take my bolts out and pull that alternator off. Okay, so these, I had a 15 millimeter socket on. These right here, we're putting a 13 on. This one here is getting a 16. I've still got my ratchet in there where I was getting the tensioner undone. So let's see what this size is. It's 13 I did this to. While I need to be different size bolt heads. But it is what it is. And we're going to pull these out. I'm going to pull this out. And we're just going to take the alternator off first. I thought the whole thing came off as a bracket, and it may. If I get this bolt out. Longer than I thought they were. I'm just going to flip those up there and put these bolts back in so I know where everything goes. Now we can get a better look at what's going on in here. And I'm going to turn a light on just in case the lighting's not great for y'all. So I'm going to pull that bracket out. We'll pull this bracket on out because I'm already halfway there. And it looks like I probably have to do that to get the serpentine belt off anyway. These engines got some goofy overlapping stuff, man. It makes them not easy to work on for shade trees. So you got to do all that. Put a serpentine belt on this thing. So we're going to go ahead and put one on while we've got everything apart. And we don't have any heavy cracking or anything in this thing, but it's so difficult to get to. We're going to go ahead and put one on it because this thing's got 120,000 miles on it. Working my belt out. It's gonna be a fun way to. It's gonna be fun putting that back on. All right, so let's look at it with the belt off, without the light, with the light. With the light, maybe not as blinding. So so here's our thermostat. So we're going to pull these bolts out, get this off of there. We haven't lost our coolant yet. I haven't drained any coolant. So here's our water pump. So we've got this whole housing here is our water pump. You can see we've got some bolts behind these idlers, so he's got to take these idler pulleys off. Okay, I'm just kind of spinning them. I want to hear what they sound like. I want to make sure they feel tight. We don't have a bunch of bearing movement. They do. They feel good. I don't see anything weird going on with them. It's going to say, hey, replace this while you're here. So tensioner, same thing. We're going to look at the pulley good. We're going to feel it, make sure it's tight. These things are plastic. The surfaces feel good, look good. So I'm confident we can put those back to use. So we're going to pull these two off so we can get to the bolts to our water pump. I need to get a catch pan under this thing so we can catch some antifreeze. Alright, I'm standing on a step ladder trying to run this camera and turn these wrenches all at the same time, so bear with me. I'm again using a 13 millimeter. My sockets are about worn out. These are impact sockets I'm twisting. I don't know why. That's what I typically grab. They're the easiest to grab out of my set. And I've been using these things for 30 years or something like that. All right, set that idler on that side. I don't know if there's any difference in them, but I'm going to keep them on the same side. Set this one over here. These things are so prone to getting air pockets and stuff. I mean, this is a hose, heater hose coming off of the thermostat housing. Then you got the water pump housing, and you've got heater hoses here. I mean, you just got passageways everywhere, and it just makes it difficult to get all the air out of these things. So what I'm going to do now is try to get some coolant out of this thing. A oil cooler replacement video on this Jeep a while back. You can go look for that in the playlists or in the scroll through all my automotive videos. We've got lots and lots of videos, so playlists are probably your easiest bet. Looking for Jeep playlists, JK maybe, or Jeep but this is part of it. It's your oil filter. We're going to do an oil change on this too, but not in this video. But your oil cooler is attached to it, and it goes down this valley. You got to take the intakes off, and it's quite a bit of work to do that job, but it's doable if you've got the time. Check out the video on that. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Please give me a thumbs up, and leave me some comments. Share it with your friends. Let me know what you're thinking. Got any questions? I'll try to answer them. I think I'm just going to go ahead and crack these open and let the coolant run down. I got a bucket set up down there with a big lid on it, like an oil catch lid. We're going to probably just do that. All right, I'm going to remove those heater hoses down there off the bottom because that is attached to the water pump housing. I didn't realize that at first, so I'm going to remove that lower radiator hose and that heater hose there, and we're going to drain some coolant out that way. I've got my hose clamp pliers. Sometimes these things are super easy. Sometimes they are a total pain in the butt. So be prepared. If you can't get them off easily, I'll show you a trick. A tool like this, and just walk it. I'm trying to show you guys the best I can with the amateur equipment filming equipment that I have, and doing this solo. So just walk it. You don't want to get real aggressive with it and stick that thing through the hose. You're just gently walking it around. But you can and will, and I have, poke a hole right through that hose, or a hose. This works on many hoses. Whoa. Let that run out. That's it. We're just going to let that stuff drain down in the bucket and move on to the next step. All right, with both my heater hose and my lower radiator hose off that water pump housing, we're going to go ahead and, I don't have my parts yet. I'm waiting on my parts to come in, so I'm just kind of taking it slow here. And I'll take the thermostat housing off. We don't want to drop our bolts out of that. These were 10 millimeters. Use a 10 millimeter socket to remove them. That's what I'm referring to. Put that right there. I hope I'll remember it. It should be right in my face. If not, I'll have to go back and refer to the video myself. All right, we're going to go ahead and put a new thermostat, new water pump, new serpentine belt, and I'm also going to put a new radiator cap on it as well. Okay. That may be part of the housing. It's a cheapo plastic looking deal. We'll see how the thermostat comes. It may have that whole housing attached to it. We're about to go pick that thing up and get my water pump. Get that out of the way, stick it back in its hole right now, and go ahead and remove my water pump bolts. So that's our water pump pulley. It does sound funny. It had a little bit of coolant around it. It wasn't a major leak. And this thing was getting up to about 260 degrees, so it did lose some coolant somewhere along the way. So we'll get these bolts out. It should be 10 millimeter socket. Yep. So we'll take the perimeter bolts out of that. I'm not going to film that step. I'm just going to take the perimeter bolts out, just follow it all the way around. I don't know if I just lost what I was trying to show you guys or not, but I put a little screwdriver behind this lip and just kind of gave it a little tug, a little push. And we're going to try to pull this pump out without dropping this camera and dropping all my bolts out of it. Wanted to leave the wanted to leave the bolts kind of in it. Because some of them are longer. But I got to figure out how to untuck this thing from around the bottom. Show you guys at the same time. And try not to drop my bolts. Which I don't think I can do. I just heard one fall. Okay, loosen all the bolts all the way. They'll come out, but I did drop a few. Okay, so there is the surfaces that I need to clean up. With the water pump out of the way, no big deal. Down to the local auto parts store, picked up a box full of parts that I ordered yesterday for this thing. We got a water pump with a gasket, thermostat, a couple gallons of coolant, serpentine belt, temp sensor, and a radiator cap. I hope he sold me the radiator cap. I asked for it. I think it's in there. We need to clean our material, or gasket material first. So we'll go in here and we'll go in here and just clean off anything in this area. You can use a little razor blade, but don't gouge the metal. You don't want to use anything too aggressive in this area and warp anything, because then you'll get some leaks. And this doesn't really require any sealer. It just has a gasket, a metal faced gasket with a little rubber, with a little rubber O-ring impregnated into it, molded into it, however you want to say. So pretty simple gasket plate, and it's a little bent up out of the box, but you know, it's just how things come these days. So I got all my bolts. I did drop two, but they were easy to recover. That one and that one I think fell out, or that one or the other. So they're all in the right spot. Just make sure your bolts go back where they came out, the same hole. That way you don't get a long bolt in a short hole or anything goofy like that. So just keep track of where your bolts go so you don't put them in the wrong place. That's always important. Clean up your gasket surfaces, and which I'm not going to film. I'm just going to clean that up. I might take a little tiny wire brush to that with that razor blade if I have any trouble getting that little rubber off, but I don't think I will. It should come right off. You can take a little parts cleaner on a rag and wipe the surface down, make sure it's nice and clean, and then we'll start reversing the procedure and pop the thermostat in, fill it with coolant, and purge it. And by purging is you got to get the air out of the system. Some cars are easier than others. Some vehicles have little valves you can open up to let the air escape as you're pouring coolant in. This one looks like it has one on top of the thermostat housing, but it's not a high point, so I really don't think that's going to work. So what we'll do, oh, Bailey's in the shop. Hey, Bailey dog. Hey. What you doing? She been cooped up. I'll let her out. Anyway, she heard me talking to the camera in here, so she came in to see what was going on. All right, shop dog in the house. Clean your surfaces, fill it with coolant, and then you got to get the air out. Oftentimes I'll fill them up. I'll let it run until it gets to operating temperature with the heat on. Kind of monitoring it, making sure that we're not overheating. And when you get heat blowing out of your vents, I'll let it cool, shut it off and let it cool off for a little while. And once it's cool enough to open the system, recheck your levels, and just keep doing that until you get good heat out of the vents and no more gurgling, burping air. And go for a test drive with the heat on. Make sure it stays blowing. I know in the summer that sucks, but then you want to go for a drive with air conditioning on it. It takes several times. And they do make vacuum devices where you can suck all the air out and then turn a valve and it pushes all the coolant in after it pulls a vacuum on the system. I don't have one of those right now. I had one, but the machine broke, so we're out of a vacuum system right now. So we're going to fill it the old-fashioned way. You got to be very, very careful with air pockets. You can burn a motor up. Sometimes it takes a long time to burp the air out. So just be careful with that. Do your research on coolant system purging, and good luck with your project. Now you can take some emery cloth and go in here and just massage this out. You don't want to stay in one spot, but in this case, I've already cleaned all the way around this thing lightly with a little brush and lightly with a razor blade. Remember, don't gouge your surfaces. And I sprayed it off real good with brake clean a couple times. But I just wanted to show you can go in there and just kind of lightly massage that rubber line off if you want. Although in this, I'm not going to do that all the way around on this one because it's going to seal. I have confidence that the surface is clean enough to seal. Now, some people are super cautious and want that thing totally removed, and you can do that, and it's no problem. But basically, all it is, it's just a dark line where it was. You take your finger and your fingernail, and if you can't catch it with your fingertip or your fingernail, it's clean. So just go around your gasket surface with your finger, make sure there's no highs and lows, make sure you can't catch your fingernail on any of it. If you can. So with your surfaces nice and clean, you can grab your new pump, a couple of the bolts, and go ahead and pop it on there. Get it started, get the bolts started, then you can kind of just hand tighten them, and then you go ahead and start relaying the rest of your bolts in, and then you can torque it down. Once you got it hanging like that, you can just start putting your bolts in one at a time. But don't tighten them up yet, just hand tighten them. Once you get it all hand tight, you're going to want to torque it to 8 foot-pounds is what it's called for. Or if you don't have a torque wrench and you're doing this in the driveway and you just want to get them as close to even as possible. Don't over tighten them, don't under tighten them. 8 foot-pounds isn't a whole lot, but it is on a little bolt. Okay, so you can buy torque wrenches really cheap. So if you're nervous about not being able to judge 8 foot-pounds with your wrist, go buy a torque wrench, and you do it in a crisscross pattern. You basically go bang, bang, boom, bing, bang, stuff like that. It's not the exact pattern, but I believe you start here and cross it over and then come down and then go to there and then go to there and then go to there and so forth. So, okay, so water pump is all bolted down except for where that alternator bracket goes through it. As it goes through here and here, and one of the alternator bolts goes through it there, and then through the timing cover there. So no big deal. All right, water pump is installed except for the belt. We got the new thermostat, which does come in the housing. That's what I figured when I pop that thing off, so I just got to take the hose off. That looks like a purge valve where you can purge some air out of it right there if you can get to it. We'll see about that when we put it back together. I've got to get the belt routed. I think we're going to go ahead and put the thermostat on, and then we'll route the belt. I get too far ahead of myself. I need to put the lower radiator hose on, the lower heater hose on. They simply just slide back on and do your fighting with the clamps. A lot of people have their own opinions on these clamps. Some people just remove them and put worm clamps on. I like to stick them right back where the factory position was, right inside the grooves, and that's usually where it'll clamp the best. Some people like to move it outside the grooves to have it a fresh spot to grab. I used to have a mechanic that worked for me that liked to do that, but his leaked a lot, so I wouldn't suggest that myself. I would try to put on here. Let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about. Right there. Ooh, dropping my pliers. Okay. I'll light it up so you can see what I'm talking about. Try to get them right in the same grooves that they were in. And then kind of give them a little twist and make sure they're not loose. These clamps are really tight still. Sometimes you'll lose a little spring pressure on these clamps and they don't grab tight anymore and they'll leak. Some people just can't get them on and off, don't have the right tools, so they'll scrap them once they get them off and just put regular clamps on. Hey, I've done it. So you need to do that, you got to do that. Regular radiator hose clamp will work. Just don't over tighten and get good ones. All right, so let's do the same with the thermostat housing. What I'm going to do, go ahead, bolt it back up. That way I'm not fighting it. Yes, it came with a new O-ring already installed in it. I'm going to clean those surfaces just like the water pump surfaces. Just drop the rag. You want to go ahead and seal all your coolant up, really, if you can, before you start messing with your belt. Clean all that coolant up off your pulleys, because you don't want antifreeze getting on a drive belt. Basically, it can cause it to squeal. These things get torqued the same way, I do believe. Don't over tighten them. Make sure they're pretty even. I like to clean my pulleys off. spray them off, give them a good wipe down, get that coolant off of there. Just spilled coolant from that hose, which I need to finish putting the hose on, don't I? Thermostat is, if that is a bleed, which it probably is, boy, it's not going to be easy to get to when you're running this thing. I mean, how are you going to get a screwdriver down there? You might be able to take that plug out and run one straight down the side of the throttle body and loosen that up, but good luck. It's probably going to strip it out. So I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way, and hopefully we get the coolant bled out quickly and it doesn't take half the day to do it. But we still got a little ways to go here. We got to get the belt routed, get the alternator back on. I'm going to try to get this belt routed, get the belt started. We're running a Gates belt. I like Gates belts. Oh, just about fell off my step ladder here. All right, before I put my idlers back on, I'm going to try to make this a little easier. Goes around the water pump over to the AC compressor. Tensioner, and then I believe it goes like this down to the power steering. And it's going to route like this up to the alternator. But we got the idlers to put back on yet. So maybe y'all can see this good. I'm trying my best here. Get that hand started. Is that where that goes? I believe so. Did I drop something out of it though? Or is it just cone on there like that? Alright, so that bolt centers that joker. Like that. So now we've got to get this back on. This thing's fun. All right, you get that tightened up. Tighten up your idler pulleys. Excuse me, your idlers. This would probably be a good time to go ahead and put your 1/2-inch drive about a 3 or 4 inch extension on it, back on your belt tensioner. So we're gonna have to place this alternator back into position. Now, I did leave this bracket just a touch loose, so if I have to wiggle it around to get the bolt started, and then we'll push down on that tensioner right there, and then we'll snake the belt back up over the alternator pulley. Fun, 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 fun. All right. I didn't want this alternator going anywhere. Bolted this thing on like a supercharger or something. Got some serious clamping power. All right, I'm gonna leave it loose. Before I tighten up, I'm putting the belt on, okay? So I'm just gonna look at the belt first. Make sure it's still all the way in the ribs on all your pulleys. If it's not, you're gonna really fight. Alright. So I'm starting to just put some body weight on it. Alright. Belt is on. Okay. See? We're good. Now I just tighten this thing down. Tighten the alternator down. We're close. All right. Tighten everything up. Kind of do a crisscross pattern like you did the other stuff. But don't over tighten it. It's all aluminum stuff. It'll rip the threads out. All right, so all those bolts are tight. Belt's on. Hoses are on. Right. Right. All our hoses, all our belts. Well, it's only one belt. All our bolts are tight. Idlers, water pump, thermostat. And we'll double check this thermostat real quick. Alternator, good to go. Just need to put the air hose back on, the air intake. And then fill it with coolant and try to work the air out of it. Like I said before, fill it up. When it stops taking coolant through the radiator, you only want your expansion tank or overflow about halfway. See how full that is? It's too much. It should be about halfway, because it's an expansion tank. You're pushing coolant into it, and when it needs it, it pulls it out of it. If it's full and it pushes coolant into it, when it expands, that coolant goes out the overflow and onto the ground. So then after it does that a couple times, you don't have enough in there, and then you start forming an air pocket inside your engine. So we're going to suck some of that coolant out. So when the radiator's full, your expansion tank's half full, cold, put the cap back on, let it run for about 15 minutes, See if the heat starts coming up, turn it off, let it cool off for 30 minutes. Check your radiator cap again, fill it back up. Repeat that procedure a few times till it stops taking any coolant into the radiator. Don't worry about putting anything more into that expansion tank. Half full, leave it. Then you go for a test drive with the heat on. Make sure everything's flowing through the heater core. Get all the air purged out. Let it sit for a couple hours. Double check it. It takes a lot of time. You got to put the time in if you want it done right, and get that air out, because that air is important. Got to get it out of there. All right. Thanks for watching. Come back and see us again in the next video, where we show you how to put a temperature sensor in, coolant temp sensor, in one of these things. Check out the other videos where I show you how to put an oil cooler in it. You got antifreeze leaking into the valley. It'll fill that valley up slowly over time, and you can't hardly find the leak. Well, it's those oil coolers. They also have coolant going through them, and that's where your oil pressure sensor is too. So you got to get rid of that. You got to take this whole thing apart. But I got a video on it. You need to see it. Go check it out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace. Good job.